The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
So I call this 10 ways to grow language in individuals with autism. That's the way I talk. And so let's take a look at what number 1 is. Well, sometimes it doesn't do it when I first do it, and then, oh, it's not doing it at all, Traven. Okay, number 1 is to use visuals, because it's like, if you think about this, we all use visuals. And it's a base way of communicating that people tend to understand. You don't believe me? Go try to drive and never look at a street sign ever again. Those are visuals. They help us to know what to do. Walk into a restaurant that's a fast food restaurant. You don't even know where to get in line unless there are visuals that tell you. And visuals can be text, or they can be pictures, they can be infocons. Fred, I got your message. We're goosing the volume, but also check the volume on your computer. And if you're using headphones and you're only putting one in, try putting them both in. We've had a lot of issues with that. But anyway, visuals. Visuals are very important to us. So why wouldn't they be important to individuals who are on the autism spectrum? And if you're somebody who is going to another country, you're especially tuned into the signs because you're not understanding the spoken language. Because visuals work. Use visuals wherever you can. Okay, number 2, teach functional communication at all times. I find that a lot of people don't know about what functional communication means, and then sometimes they don't, I'm gonna say this, don't get offended, but sometimes they don't respect functional communication in the way that it needs to be respected. Example, we say that there is a child here who is struggling to get vocal communication. So the team goes to the parents and they say, we want to start using an iPad and with icons that will help this child to be able to speak. There's an emotional impact that it has for the parents, and we see some parents saying, no, I want you to work on speech. I don't want us to be get gummed up in this. We're gonna talk more about this, but this is completely wrong. Studies, time after time, have shown us that if you give that assisted technology, you're actually your hope of getting to speech is faster and more efficient. I guess that's faster, right? Right? You're more likely to be successful if the child wasn't speaking and you gave them an iPad than if you continued to drill on vocal language, right? But here's the other problem that parents, they're like, oh, no, we use the iPad. The iPad that's his mode of communication. It's absolutely important. And then they go, okay, it's time to go outside, but it's raining. Let's stick the iPad in your backpack. No. That is not respect for functional communication. I know it doesn't feel like it's disrespect, but it is. Stop and think about it. Would you turn to your other child who's capable of speaking and say, it's raining, so you don't get to talk now? We wouldn't do that. So we have to be respectful of functional communication. We'll talk more about this in a second. And we got to use it all of the time. Moving on to number 3. It didn't do it for me again, Traven. Oh, there we go. Or is this 4? This is 4. I went too far. Okay, 3. We're going to reward approximations. You see that I've got goalposts in the picture there because we're constantly setting up a goalpost somewhere. Okay, that's the goal. But every time somebody kicks in the direction of the goal, we're going to reward it. That's how we get to speech. If we decided that, well, I'm only going to reward you when you can stand and give a thesis, defense, we'd never get there, right? We're gonna, if I say fish and you say, you're gonna get a reward if that's where you are. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick up the goalpost and move it. But we're gonna reward those approximations. Number 4, we're gonna reward requests, and that means manding and man training. So you want something, we're gonna reward you for asking for it. But remember, we're gonna reward approximations, right? So manding is asking for something. It isn't always vocal. Let's always remember functional communication. You can point to it. And that's great. And if you point to it and you want it when we're doing man training, we're going to give it to you. And that's how that's going to roll. Okay, we'll talk more about this in a second. Number 5, we are going to give attention to communication. This also slays me, is that we all of us, myself included, say we want our kiddos that are on the spectrum, whether they're, small children, teenagers, adults, we want them to be able to communicate their needs, right? I don't know a single parent who doesn't feel strongly about that, right? But then there are times when we will ignore them. And it's part of being a human being, but let's stop that. Let's reward all communication. So let's not reward, let's give attention to communication. So, but a lot of times it's inconvenient. You're on the phone, and that's when your child decides that they're gonna point and really try to get your attention. Give attention to communication. We need to be doing that. We're going to talk extensively about this. This is not a repeat, Parker. This is new. Okay, number 6, we're going to work on oral motor separately and in a fun way. If you have a desire to speak and you're doing that approximation, but people never understand what you're saying, then it's not rewarding and you give up. So we need to work on the muscles of the head and face so that we can correctly articulate enough so that people can understand us. But if we do that while we're working on the hard thing, which is language, it can be very, very frustrating. So we're going to work on oral motor separately, and we're going to work on it in a fun way. It's okay, Parker. Glad that you're here. Number 7, so important. We're not going to take frustration personally. We just talked about how if we're working on one thing and working on another thing, it can cause frustration. Some of this is really hard for our kids. If it weren't hard, they would have just started speaking. But it's hard for them. And we're going to be asking them to do some things that are hard for them. We have to make it fun. And we have to understand that sometimes they're going to get frustrated. And it's not that they're frustrated with us, and we cannot afford to take it personally. I love that my son said to me years ago, frustration, no one ever died from frustration, and frustration is just a sign that things are about to change. Okay, so when your child is frustrated, instead of getting frustrated that they're frustrated or getting mad that they're frustrated at you, try to put it in a better context for them and for you. You can language it and say, yes, you're feeling frustrated right now, but you're doing a good job and what you're doing is important, right? And reward them, but don't take it personally. Okay, number 8. It's that KISS thing, right? Keep it simple, silly. We're going to keep your communications simple so that we're working on the receptive language. And if you go to a foreign country and somebody says to you, you have no idea, right? But if they say 𝗔𝗂𝗁 and they're pointing at the coat, you know that 𝗔𝗂𝗁, I'm making this up, no language is at 𝗔𝗂𝗁. 𝗔𝗂𝗁 is the coat because they kept it simple and they pointed to it. You're going to keep it simple as well. Okay, number 9 is bubbles are an equivalent, that you're going to use things that are really super rewarding that work on oral motor, that is something that the individual is excited by. Now, if it's a very little kid, my guess is bubbles is going to work because bubbles are fabulous. You have to make a to blow, right? And there is the sound of bubbles, right? That's a very wonderful plosive sound to be working on with kids. And then they get the bubble. If they say they get the bubble, right? Super reinforcing. But if you have a teenager, maybe they're not going to be into bubbles. Maybe they're going to be into something else. But finding that perfect thing that's reinforcing and hopefully works a little bit on oral motor too, but that they're going to want, really important. And number 10, which is really the first one, but I saved it to the end because I wanted you to see these other things, get you excited about it before I say to you, meet them where they are. Everyone is in a different place with their communication. I'm in a different place than you're in with communication. And our kiddos are for sure in a different place, whether they are children, whether they are teens or adults, each of them is in an individual place. We have to start where they are and accept them where they are and enter into this loving relationship where now we're gonna try to build a skill. There's a lot of emotion that comes into play when we're building language. And so but if you keep it here, meeting them where they are, then you get the connection like there is in the picture. This loving, because that's communication too. And it's not gonna look like this with all of our kids because some of our kids Eye contact is not the warm squishy for them, right? It might be a handhold, but we're going to meet them where they are.
Video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook.